Hello, and welcome back to the FEZ show. I'm Jack Giordmaina, and Happy New Year, everyone. So, in today's show, we've got quite a bit to talk about actually, because we've got Maserati who have joined Formula E, so we'll get into the grips of that and find out what that means. And also, we've got to look at testing because it's been a while since testing, but we haven't done a show actually since testing, so we might as well recap that. And we've got Mr. Pickering, who I'll introduce now, who was at testing, so we've got the man to tell us everything ahead of the Saudi Arabian E-Prix, which is only 2 weeks away now. So already 2 weeks away from the start of the season. So plenty to discuss in today's show. I'm joined obviously by Jack Pickering and the wonderful Edward Hunter. Boys, how are we?
I'm gonna have to stretch my mind back. It feels like a very long time ago that I was in Valencia, but yeah, no, it's great to be back, and yeah, just 2 weeks to go to the start of the season. I cannot wait for this season. I think it's going to be a great season, not just for Formula E, but also for us.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. Of course, I'm very, very excited for Saudi Arabia as ever. Wink. But yeah. Anyway, there's like a gun pointed to the back of my head. But I am also really excited for the news we've got to talk about because we got a lot, haven't we? Haven't we, Jack?
Yeah, we got a lot, and I suppose we'll start with the first one, which this one I think came out of the blue. I don't think we were really expecting a new OEM effectively to come into the series with Maserati. So I thought first initial impressions, Picko, on the Maserati news. I think obviously it's great for Formula E, came out of nowhere, but kind of the good news story that Formula E needed going into the season.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've just come off the back of losing two German manufacturers in Audi and BMW. At the end of this season, we're also losing the Mercedes team. And so, yeah, I think it's fantastic that we're going to have Maserati coming in next season. Next season, they won't be an OEM. However, they will get that sooner than later. It's looking like they're going to use DS powertrains for the first season. And yeah, it's looking like they're going to take over that Mercedes project. So they're going to be the team. It looks like they might be Team Brackley next season. But yeah, it's absolutely fantastic because obviously we were going to lose another team at the end of this year, and so that's kind of saved it a little bit more. But yeah, it was kind of in the works, but no one was really completely 100% sure that it was going to happen, and then obviously Tuesday they sprung that surprise on us. So yeah, I think it's fantastic news for Formula E, and can't wait to see them next season.
Ed, thoughts?
I have a few. Okay. Well, obviously, I'm with Pico in that it's probably good news for Formula E because the last time an OEM, electric or manufacturer of any kind, tried to join Formula E was Mercedes back in 2017, and they're already leaving at the end of this season. So yeah, definitely need some good news. Haven't had much Italian representation on the grid since Trulli GP folded at the end of the first season, and now we have a proper Italian manufacturer, which is great. It's been something we talked about on this show before about the potential of Ferrari joining, and we always said it was very unlikely Ferrari would actually join. What was more likely was a sort of more closely associated brand like Alfa Romeo, or as it happens, Maserati would join, and that's sort of what's played out. Of course, the link is between Ferrari and Maserati is Fiat, essentially the Agnelli group, family. The Agnelli family, I believe, has like shares in both, and there's these very close links between the two companies. Of course, Maserati hasn't raced in open wheelers in a long, long time, not since Fangio won the Formula One championship in the late 50s. But has had success in like GTs and other categories, but a bit more recently, like within the last 10 years or so. So certainly it's not something that the group, the brand, is normally associated with, but certainly those like electric vehicles altogether, which is new territory for them. But this has all come about because of the Stellantis group, which is basically a merger between the Peugeot Citroën sort of conglomerate PSA in France and Fiat Chrysler, which is of course the Italian side of things. So yeah, that's where the DS link that Picko was talking about has come from, because DS, of course, already with Techeetah, and now Maserati coming in with the links with their parent group, they've got an existing powertrain to use. Of course, it's a pretty short gap between this announcement and the start of Gen 3, Season 9, with testing is going to be like the end of this year, basically, or middle of this year, depending on how you look at it in terms of time. But so I think great news for Formula E, good news for Maserati. Let's hope they stay for a long period and that they can get a great team underneath them. I agree with Picko partly that I think they're going to partner up with an existing team because of the time frame. I don't think it will be Mercedes, or what's currently Mercedes anyway. I think it will be a team more like Venturi. Because remember, Picko, when you were at testing, you asked Jerome what powertrain Venturi were going to use for Gen 3, and he gave a very kind of evasive answer to the words to the effect of, that will become clear in the fullness of time, or something like that. I'll tell you when we're ready, basically. And it seems now things have changed. We know a bit more. Maybe Jerome will give us a more clear answer next time.
Sounds very much like Jerome D'Ambrosio, though, doesn't it? Right, with his way of words, right? I do. I think it's a good news story. I think Formula E needed something, right? It's been doom and gloom for ages in Formula E. Well, it's just like one battering after another. So we needed something positive, I think, going into season 8. But we're talking there about the potential Picko. I'll go to you first. About, are they going to come, okay, as an OEM first, potentially using the DS powertrain, then possibly then having their own powertrain? Are they going to take a team spot, or are they going to take the vacant spot that Audi's left? That's a good question. And then maybe, where does this leave McLaren? Like, if Maserati have come in, does this mean this McLaren deal's not going to happen? Is it going to happen? What do we think?
Well, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Apart, if they replace Mercedes, so if they do replace Mercedes or Venturi or someone like that, then there is still that extra 2 slots in the field that they can use. So McLaren, they can come in if they want to. I feel like they need to make a decision kind of soonish. But yeah, for here and now, it's looking unlikely. But then again, we weren't really expecting the Maserati news. So yeah, I think it's something to keep an eye on as the season develops. But they won't be a manufacturer for next season, because obviously that list. I think that list is officially confirmed in a couple of days' time. Well, this video might be out by then, but it's looking like we're going to have very few OEMs next year, so they're going to have to get a customer powertrain as well.
Which makes sense, as we said, with the DS link. So Ed, what do you think going for McLaren then? Because you were, I think, hinting more that they might, the very good tie-up that McLaren and Mercedes have. I think you were sort of hinting that you're assuming that McLaren, if they were to come, they might take over that Mercedes role, whereas Picko thought maybe the other way around.
Yeah, I think that would just make a bit more sense to me, with especially Mercedes supplying the powertrain to McLaren in Formula 1. There's that historic link that they used to be effectively the Works Mercedes squad in Formula 1 since like the mid-90s all the way through to obviously 2010 when Mercedes came back as their own factory team. And I just don't quite see. I think there's a little bit of a conflict of interest with Stellantis, with Mercedes not really being part of the group, and all those engineers and staff, and even some of the drivers, they're contracted to Mercedes. So I feel like if Mercedes pulls out, they're more likely to try for Mercedes somewhere else, rather than stay with whatever the team becomes. There'll still be some assets, of course, that might still be lying around. I could see someone else, or the team could even carry on independently as a sort of customer team, but I don't quite see them partnering up with Maserati. I could see McLaren potentially stepping in there. We haven't heard from McLaren. We were originally supposed to make the announcement on whether they're taking up the option or not at the end of last year, and they've delayed that to Q1 of 2022. So at some point in the next couple of months, you'd assume. The noises we've been hearing at McLaren seem a little bit kind of, especially since Mercedes pulled out, they've been a bit kind of, oh, is this really going to be successful for us? They announced they were going into Extreme E for the forthcoming season, so that's sort of underway, and they've made announcements for that, but it doesn't sound like they are as enthusiastic as they were when they signed that option last year. So fingers crossed McLaren, something does happen that makes McLaren change their mind. Maybe this Maserati announcement might be the good, kick up the proverbial to to speed that process up. But either way, I do hope the decision gets made soon, and I hope somebody takes up that 12th slot, because it would certainly be nice to have a full grid again.
Yeah, because I think when we were talking about Gen 3 and obviously for next season, I think the deadline is actually around about this week time. It's not around about January. Pico's got his hand up, and I don't know what his hand up's for. Pico, come in.
I was going 1-5, 15. It's the
15.
15th.
Ah, it's the 15th,
It's
so
the
it's 2 days
15th.
away. I knew it was this week. The date had escaped me.
Somebody has not played Zoom Charades in a while.
Yeah, I was like, what? I was like, what? It's like, just speak. It's not hard. But anyway, so on the 15th, so as I said, that's 2 days away from us recording. So by the time that this video is out, right, the deadline for McLaren to actually say that they're going to come in to season 3, go back in time, season 9, is very soon. So they effectively, the decision should have been made by now, pretty much, unless Formula E, without anyone knowing, has given McLaren a delay. So it has to come in, but maybe McLaren have a bit of extra time, and the announcement might come, let's say, after Diriyah, for example, or there may be a TBC slot. You know, we know Formula E love a TBC slot for one of their for the calendars and so forth. So that'll be interesting. And I thought something else to discuss, which has also been a slight good news story for Formula E, is that, talk about Gen 3, they have released these mock-up pictures of this Gen 3 car. We've sort of got a look at it. And the first, for me, it's becoming more like a spacecraft. I don't know, Picko, what you think, and I'll get your views on the pictures that we've seen so far. And they were they cropped up again with the Maserati launch. And I was thinking with those, like, they look like these big back wing, like sticking out like this. I just feel like, which is kind of what Formula E wanted. They wanted this kind of futuristic look. And from first glimpses, I'm really seeing more of that, sci-fi, futuristic spacecraft look that looks like we might see with this Gen 3 car. What did you make of the pictures, Picko, when you saw them?
Well, they timed it absolutely beautifully in terms of when they released the Gen 3 pictures, because I remember this clear as day. It was the evening before Media Day in Valencia, and so going into Media Day, like, everyone was like, "Oh, did you see the car last night?" Yeah, there was lots of murmurs going around Valencia. You're like, "Oh, this is."
It was like it was
cool.
naughty pictures, wasn't it? It was like, did you see the car? Like, did you see what you saw? Like, did you see it? Like, did you see it? Like, yeah, I did see it. Oh, yeah, keep it on the download, right?
Yeah. But yeah, obviously we won't be seeing it properly. I think we'll probably see it in that 2-month gap that we've now got between Mexico and Rome, whether they're going to show it in the flesh in Rome or whether, like, they're just going to do an online release like they have for some others. But yeah, it's obviously it's exciting because this is where we're heading for. This is the last season with this current generation of car, so it's really exciting what we're going to have for next season. But yeah, I do completely see, like, yes, it does. I'm starting to see these, like, more kind of jagged lines kind of thing that go around. And, like, when the Gen 2 Evo was released a few years ago, and as has been well documented on this show over the past 2 years, I really liked the look of that car, but I know that the Gen 3 is going to be nothing like that. So I feel like this has been a departure from what the Gen 2 Evo was supposed to be. And so I think we are going to have something new for Gen 3. But yeah, I can't wait to see it in the first part of this year.
Yeah. The one thing, though, talking about that Gen 2 Evo car, Ed, I'm expecting to be part of this Gen 3 car is the removal of the wheel arches or the wheel covers, right? Because there was a huge sort of, push that Formula E cars were a bit too strong. They were banging into walls, and if they didn't have the wheel arches or the wheel covers as such, then, we'd have to have this cleaner driving, so maybe promote some cleaner races rather than some of the, I wouldn't say crash fests that Formula E, I would say, has had, but, just to sort of promote better racing.
Yeah, we have seen quite a few races where the wheel arches have fallen off due to minor contact, and they've had to sort of just continue on with exposed wheels anyway. I remember that happening a couple of times in the last couple of seasons with the Gen 2 car. And yeah, certainly the preview shots we've seen, the car, to me, it looks very much a bit like a Arrowhead, a little bit more, especially with the sort of different rear wing that it's got. Of course, we can only really speculate at the darker parts, like Picko had alluded to. They were all the big wigs in Formula E were giving a little peep show in a little garage somewhere in Valencia, so we weren't part of that, unfortunately. But yeah, certainly the wheels aren't covered on top. The front wing, it looks like, does have a little bit of sort of sticky uppy bits, if I can to use a technical term, that sort of covers the front of it. But certainly it's going to be a little bit more in that sense of having a more open wheel looking car rather than what we have at the moment. It's going to look a little bit more traditional single seater, but certainly the wings will be a little different. So far, it's sort of reminded me, and I'll probably be proven completely wrong, of like that old Lotus. I forget which Lotus it was called, but it's when they went to Indianapolis with what looked like a bit like a sort of aerodynamic doorstop. It looks a little bit like that to me, with a few sticky up bits on the front wing so far. But of course, I can't see most of it because it's in darkness. So I'm speculating. But I like the look of it so far. It's exciting. It's a little bit annoying not to see the full thing just yet, but I know Formula E do like to keep us in suspense, so I'm sure it'll be worth the wait.
I think we all have to eat a few more carrots so we can see through the darker bits, right? So more vegetables.
Or just bake it on Instagram or whatever they do these days.
Yeah, more vegetables for the Formula E Zone team. Let's talk testing then, right? Because I know, Mr. Pickering, you were there, right? So you're the man, right? You're our news beat guy. Firstly, how was testing for you? Like, how did you enjoy the experience? And what did you learn? What did you find interesting? Because obviously the new qualifying format was tested, so maybe let's talk that. What did you make of the new qualifying format? And because you are one of the only people who have seen it in the flesh so far.
Yeah, no, I am quite privileged to have seen the qualifying format in action, and I have heard from a few drivers on their thoughts on it, on what they want to do, because there was a press conference. That was done on the Monday, and there was press conferences throughout the week. So, which you can watch on the Formula E Zone channel. So don't click off yet, but look at it after. Yeah. So it was it was a very testing week for me. There was like at the start of it, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and then it kind of like quietened off, and then but it was still a fun week. It was still great to be back in the paddock for the first time post COVID that I've been back in a motorsport paddock. But yeah, the thing that did intrigue me most was the new qualifying format. So we've been over it before, but I'm sure people won't properly understand it until we get to the first race in Diriyah. As soon as you see it, you completely understand. But it does take a lot of learning. So basically, there's two sessions of what's now 12 minutes. It used to be 10, but they tried 10. But they've now changed it to 12 because it was too short. Because they do a tyre change halfway through the session, so we're going to have pit stops in qualifying. So because of the rule where you have to set a lap time in the first 5 minutes, it means that it means that they're going to put new rubber on later in the session so that they can try and get that quickest time, which puts them in the best chance possible when they get to the playoffs, because the playoffs are done like in a football, like in the Football World Cup. So the highest seeded one goes against the lowest seeded one from the other group, and then so it's A1 versus B4, A2 versus B3, B3 versus I've lost it now. Anyways, so basically, highest seeded one in one group, lowest seeded one in the other group. You just work out like that, and then it kind of makes sense from there. One of the main things that was tested about that was how long a gap to leave between each car. So basically, in Valencia, they left 5 or 10 seconds between each car, whereas when speaking to Robin Frines a few days after, he was like, no, it needs to be 30 because 10 was too much. Because like, even though Formula E cars don't have that much dirty air, they still get caught up in it. I feel like I've explained it far too much. I need to let someone else speak because
right. Yeah. So I think from your, just to sum up your recollection or however you described it. So the first part of the session is very much like F1 in my opinion, in terms of you've got two groups in terms of and you're qualifying to get into to the next stage, right? And if you don't make that cut to the playoffs or the quarterfinal, semi-final, final section, that forms your grid, right? So basically you're trying to qualify to get into Q3 effectively, right? And if you don't make it into Q3 from your Group A or Group B, your lap times are then merged together and that forms your grid spot. And then, as you said, from there, then you go into the playoffs. Is that right, Picko?
Almost. You almost got it right. So it's a bit like F2 in Monaco. So it's whichever group is quickest gets the odd side of the grid. So that's 9 to 23, and then the slower side gets 10 to 24. Apart from that, spot on.
Perfect, right? So there we go. Tweaks here and there when we get there. So that makes sense. So the fastest group gets the higher side, and then the slower group gets down to 24th effectively. So if you're in the slow group and you're last in the slow group, you will be starting last. And if you are the slowest in the fast group, you'll be starting, well, not 24th, 20, it's 22nd and 21st now, I believe. With the lack of Audi no more. It's so sad that Audi have gone, right? All these numbers, everything has to change. But interesting. But one thing, Ed, I want to talk about now is this, we say this every season, and I'm guilty of it. Is it going to be the closest season ever in Formula E? And I'm going to say this because we have to remember, now people may have forgotten that the hardware from Season 7 into Season 8 has not changed, right? So it's the hardware, the powertrain effectively that left Berlin all the way back in August, can you believe it, right? Will be going to Diriyah and was tested in November. However, the software, so all the teams can do is what they can do pretty much during the season is update the software. So considering that the hardware's stayed exactly the same, we had such a tight season last season, every team got a chance to sort of improve their car soft-wise. Surely, this is going to be the most competitive season ever. Could we see the likes of Dragon, Neo, fighting up there for a podium? Do you think it's possible? Do you think points are on the cards more often for those types of teams? Or do you think, actually, no, because they were still slow last season, they're still going to be slow, and it's going to be the exact same teams as it was last season fighting for the championship?
I know this is Formula E, Jack, but it sounds like we are veering into the territory of miracles and fantasy there. I know Dragon did get a podium last season, but that was exceptional circumstances in Valencia, which I think Formula E and fans of Formula E in general would rather forget, in all honesty. Apart from Nico Muller, of course, but sadly he's not in the sport anymore. I do think both of those teams could probably score a few more points. I certainly think Dan Ticktum and Antonio Giovinazzi haven't signed up to completely out of their outfits, and certainly they've got a season under their belt using the powertrain, so at least know how to get a bit more performance out of it. Certainly with the new qualifying format, you're not going to get Neo or Dragon qualifying into Superpole quite as often as we saw on occasions last year, where we'd get some sort of almost kind of freak results. You're going to see the more efficient, the faster cars, and the drivers that are really good at this specific dual format. Like Da Costa supposedly has always excelled, and he did really well at Monaco last year. He got pole position there narrowly from Vrines. So I expect Da Costa to really excel in this kind of format in the DS Techeetah. But certainly in terms of overall competitiveness, I don't think you're entirely wrong, Jack. I certainly think Nissan, they were the last to introduce their powertrain. They had a lot of chassis issues for Buemi. They've got Maxi Gunter joining them, who did win a race last season in New York, an exceptionally quick driver. So certainly I would hope Nissan would do a little bit better this season, although they have lost Oliver Rowland, of course, to Mahindra. And I think Mahindra will be a bigger threat this season, at least to start with, because what we saw last season was they ended quite strong, and as they sort of got on top of their powertrain and sort of figured out their strengths and weaknesses. So we're going to see a sort of Season 7 Part 2 with a slightly different qualifying format, I think would be a fair way of putting it.
Picko, I just want to veer back slightly to the qualifying system, because I've got one question that's come to my mind. Do we think, like in Formula 1, the cream rises to the top, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, they're thereabouts, first and second, they're always there, right? And you get the good drivers like Lando Norris's of this world, the George Russells, who were, might sneak a top four, Charles Leclerc, for example, Carlos Sainz, who might consistently be up there, and those who it's sort of whereas in Formula E, the qualifying was so random. So do you think this new system will enable the cream of the crop to rise to the top?
Yes. Short answer is yes. I think that was the main issue with Season 7. Because the cream was never able to rise to the top with the field last year. Whereas when we've done it over previous years, it hasn't been as the qualifying format wasn't as effective like as it was last season. Everyone saw what we'd been trying to do for the past 6 seasons and doing everything with that with the unfair track advantage and stuff. Like, people saw it beforehand but didn't think much about it until last season, when it properly got we went into the last round with 18 drivers still with a shot at the title. So that's that. So that's why they've changed this qualifying format. And yes, I think the cream will rise to the top. I completely agree with Ed that you are off your nut on the fact that Neo and Dragon are gonna do anywhere well. I think that the fact that we got this new qualifying format, it means that they're gonna struggle even more, because they won't have that track advantage to try and get themselves up the field. We won't have them Oliver Turvey and Santiago moments when he somehow got that Neo with a 1-year-old Penske engine into the Super Pole session. We won't have those moments like that anymore, which is a shame, because they were special moments, but it wasn't exactly fair on other drivers. So yeah, it's however, I do expect that going into the season, it's still going to be as competitive as the last. We're still going to have I think that we'll probably still have a fair few drivers going into the final race, still with a chance to win the title. I'm hoping that I'll head to Seoul, and there'll be like 7 people. I'll go like, "Oh, you can win the championship this weekend. How are you feeling about that?" Because I think that's kind of the number you want. Like, you want a few people. You don't want 18, but you want a few people to be able to win it. And yeah, I think we've got a really good season in this site. It's not going to be the same as Season 7, because we got the new format. We got the new rules with extra time instead of taking the power away. We've got driver swaps with Degrassi going to Venturi and Gunter going to Nissan and Roland going to Mahindra and all that lot. So it's not going to be the same. But it will. It's just going to be different.
Fair enough. So to end the show, then, I'm going to come up with some things we'd like to see, and I'm going to come up with a couple of things to tell you. I'm going to give you some scenarios, and I'm going to tell you if you think that they're going to happen in Season 8, because we're saying it's going to be so close, right? So I'm going to start off with Ed, and we're going to talk about Mitch Evans, right? Mitch Evans, it's the person, I think, in the Formula E field who is much loved by the fans, and someone who is respected as a top quality driver, but it just hasn't clicked for one way or another in Formula E. Well, it has, but it hasn't. Like, he hasn't really got the results he's wanted. He always seems quite disappointed that he failed to achieve something. You know, go back to New York when he was trying to win and he ends up hitting the wall. Like, it doesn't work out for Mitch Evans. Does it work out for Mitch Evans? Can you see him winning multiple races this season?
It is a bit weird to think that Mitch Evans has only won 2 races in his career. Rome 2019, or it was Season 5, right?
Very correct, yeah.
And also Mexico 2020. Those were the only 2. And of course, Helps going back to Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez this season, which I'm sure is music to Mitch Evans' ears, because he always seemed to excel at that track. I certainly think he can. It's just a matter of how competitive the Jaguar is, because obviously, even though there's not so much hardware development at all really with the Freeze, there's still a bit of software development. And we saw the Jaguar wasn't always the most reliable, as we saw in Berlin when Evans stalled from 3rd on the grid and ended up being collected by Mortara, which was basically the end of his looking at what was looking up to very promising at that point, his very promising title hopes. So Mitch Evans will certainly be hoping to at least once again get down to the final race in with a chance of the championship. And certainly him and Sam Bird, I think, will just be hoping that Jaguar are in the mix. And I think from Jaguar's point of view, they don't care which one wins really. they certainly seem to work pretty well together as a team last season. So let's hope that continues, because that can only be good news for the competitiveness of the championship when you've got strong teams like Mercedes and Techeetah knocking around.
Picko, Antonio Giovinazzi, comes from F1, moves to Dragon, only has a couple of days testing, misses the last day of testing. Is it going to be a flop, or is it going to be a success?
Answers on a postcard, please. I don't know. I think what he brings from F1 is pure speed. I think he will be incredibly quick. It'll be like what Jean-Eric Vergne was in season 1. He was quick in qualifying, but when it came to the races, Vergne would usually fall back throughout that season. Yes, he got a couple podiums, I think, in the Andretti in season 1, but he would never properly challenge for a win that season. And yeah, I think it's I think he and Dan Ticktum, they're gonna have a big old fight towards the back. I think the aim for both of them should be points on a few occasions, but I don't see them cracking the top 15 in the championship.
Okay, interesting. Ed, will Lucas Di Grassi win the championship with Venturi?
I could see it happening. I sort of hope it doesn't, though. I sort of hope Mortara wins, as I've said before. I think when Vinny's asked me this, out of the two, I'd be much happier to see Eduardo Mortara walk away with the championship, especially because he, again, one of the people who came really close last season and was just pipped by De Vries, not helped by Mitch Evans stalling in front of him and Mortara breaking his back. I really hope Ido's okay, actually. I think he's definitely had the off-season to recover, and it'll take more than that because he had a big crash in practice for Diriyah last year as well, when the brake pile wire system failed, so and he hit the barrier. So he's a tough lad, Ido. I'm sure he'll be fine. And I certainly think him being in the Venturi team for so long and being clearly everyone at Venturi absolutely loves Ido Mortara. So I think I think he'll be, at least to start with, he'll have a little bit of an advantage. But Di Grassi, of course, very clever, very brilliant on his strategies, so I can't deny that. So I think Di Grassi will certainly be a threat, and I could see some big fireworks between those two, actually, as the season goes on. I don't quite see Venturi taking the championship. I think it's going to be someone else who takes it, but I certainly wouldn't count them out. And if one of them does, I hope it's Ido and not Lucas.
Because obviously they performed so well with that Mercedes powertrain, and obviously with the field being more competitive and how competitive Venturi were this season, I don't think you can count it out, even though there's already talk of Di Grassi being on the move for season 9 already. Picko has his hand up. He's like, I want to speak. And I'm like, go on then, Picko. What have you got to say? Because I was going to kind of throw this back to you as well.
No, okay, if you're going to throw this back to me on the Venturi thing, right, okay. In the mock qualifying format, both Di Grassi and Mortara top the qualifying groups. They are looking extremely rapid, and I said this off air to both of you before we started this, but I'm going to say it now. I think if Venturi don't come to top 3 in the constructors, I think it would be a disappointing season for them. And that is my bold prediction for this season. They should come top 3 in constructors this year.
Right, I'm liking this little segment that we got here. Right then, to finish off the episode then, one thing you boys would like to see, could be a driver, could be something that you want to see this season, or someone you want to do well, or something to happen. I'll start with Ed first.
Okay.
I know it's a can of worms.
There's quite a few things I can narrow down. Obviously, I would love to see Oliver Turvey win a race, but that's, again, dreamland. So I think I would love to see Oliver Rowland. He's talked about wanting to win titles at Mahindra. I really would love to see him excel, because I think he's an absolutely brilliant attacking driver. We've seen some amazing qualifying laps from him, and one race win. I would love to see him add to that, and I think Mahindra could be the car to achieve that in. We haven't talked much about Envision. I really think I really think Envision came really close to winning the Teams Championship last season. I think they will do it this season, especially with they're essentially the factory Audi team now. At least in name, because Audi have left. So I think Nick Cassidy and Robin Fryns are going to be a huge threat. I would be very surprised if we get to the end next season and neither of them wins a race, because they didn't win any races last season, but they were still in the hunt because they were really consistent. So I think that's going to change. I think they're going to luck in and win a couple of races that like last year, the factory Audi team won, but the customer team didn't. So I think that's going to reverse what has to, because the factory Audi team's not there. Anyway, I'm getting myself mixed up in my brain. I'm not answering the questions.
so I'll throw over to Picko then. What is the one thing you're really looking forward to in Season 8, or one thing that you'd really like to happen?
Okay, so this is going to be a really kind of cheesy answer that you guys are going to just moan about after we go off air and everything. But the thing that I'd love to see by the end of this season is Formula E get the credit it deserves, because it's a mega series, and just the amount of times people kind of like push it to one side and say that it's a gimmicky series. Yes, it has gimmicks, but it produces fantastic racing, and we will prove that. We don't have to do it artificially through a qualifying format this season. That is my aim. So by the end of this season, what I want to see is Formula E getting the credit that it deserves for being a mega championship.
Never going to happen, Picko. Never going to happen, because they will always shift the goalposts.
Excellent. I suppose it's only fair that I do one then. So for me, you know what I'm really looking forward to see? I'm really looking forward to see the rise of Sebastian Buemi, because I think last season was a bit of a dip. He's on a bit of a downward spiral. He's still a great driver. At the end of the day, this man could have won 3 titles easy. He could have been a triple Formula E champion if things went his way. He's only got that one championship. I think there's still a driver in there for Sebastian Buemi. So I think Sebastian Buemi will win more than one race this season. So there we go. And then more than one race could make him a title contender, never knowing how this championship is going to go. So that's the one thing I'm looking forward to. If you still got this far into the episode and you're in the YouTube comments, or if you're on a podcast channel that does comments as well, put your comments. What are you looking forward to seeing in Season 8? It'd be great to see what people would like to see. And I also think it's going to be a big season for Alexander Sims. I really do. I think it's going to be a big season for Alexander Sims and that Mahindra. You know, with Oliver Rowland, I'm really interested to see how he performs this season. Boys, it's been a pleasure as always. It's been great to be back.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to you going absolutely insane over some silly controversy that's almost certainly going to happen at some point or other and be blown up into something way bigger than it actually is, if last year was anything to go by. But I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to being jet lagged for half of this year. But yeah, roll on Diria, can't wait.
Exactly. And I was going to do the Roy Keane thing. That's our job, right? It's our job to spice up the controversy, to make it interesting, right? It's our job. But yes, before we go, Picko is jetting around the world. It's Picko's on tour. We mentioned this in the
provisionally in Diria.
Provisionally, right?
We're treading waters at the moment. But yes, for the rest of we hope that this season we're going to have someone on site at every single race this year. So
yes,
yeah,
so which will be awesome, and that means we can really like ramp up our coverage of the championship season on YouTube, on social media, on the website as well. So we're really, really looking forward to that. So I suppose what we'll do, next time we do an episode, you'll probably be back from Dirio. We'll have our, the race, post-race, and find out everything that's happened after the first 2 races of the season.
I'll be sunburnt.
Potentially, yes.
I'll be sunburnt by the next time you see me.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So 2 weeks, it literally is 2 weeks. Come Friday, by the time this podcast is out, it'll be 2 weeks to the race. So enjoy the race. Please stay tuned to all the social media outlets for us in terms of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, which Mr. Pickering is now running. And to find out everything that happens over the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for watching. We've been Formula E Zone. Goodbye.